safe.
Eat everything from chicken nuggets to boneless breasts.
Dr. Oz goes inside the chicken industry.
A chicken might go through 3 chemical baths like this as it goes through the slaughterhouses.
Our investigation blows the lid off the business.
How is this even possible?
The gut-busting bacteria that may be contaminating your food. Coming up next on Dr. Oz.
Boy, are we ever conflicted about our food? And never is this more obvious than when it comes to chicken. 95% of you eat chicken. It's in all of these different forms. You can find it everywhere. Today, you're going to meet an investigative reporter who spent the last 10 years infiltrating the food industry. His expose on the handful of companies that have taken over the chicken industry in the U.S. has shaken up the food world. In his new book, The Meat Racket, author Christopher Leonard details the explosive story of the rise of America's favorite food and gained unprecedented access to one of the companies that has seized the nation's chicken supply. By infiltrating the chicken industry's inner circle, Leonard reveals an intense industry-wide hold on every aspect of chicken production, from the conception of the egg to the chicken to the supermarket. Today, what you need to know about what's really in America's chicken. Chris Leonard is here. Now, you've devoted 10 years of your life investigating the food industry. Why this passion?
Well, for me, it almost started by accident. I'm a business reporter and was based in the Midwest, and I kept just bumping up against this system. And every time I saw it, I became more fascinated. I'll never forget the first time I walked into a modern chicken farm. It's this giant warehouse with 75,000 birds on the ground. The air is thick with ammonia. It's a memorable experience. But the seeds for the book really came in 2004 when I went down to a small town called Waldron, Arkansas, and was just struck by how much power these companies can have. Farmers were afraid to talk to me about the poultry companies and the safety of their own living room. Farmers were afraid that their neighbors would find out I'd been there. I had never seen anything like it before, and I wanted to find out how we got to where we are today.
So Chris calls the industry a racket. That's the word he uses. In his book, he describes how one company has essentially pioneered the model of industrial meat production that exists today in America. I mean, how is this even possible? One company?
Yeah, the company at the heart of my book is Tyson Foods, and that firm really pioneered the system as it exists today, and it's one of the biggest players in the system today. What happened is that during the 1970s and 80s, we saw this sweeping wave of mergers happen in the meat industry. These companies bought out all of their competitors. And what that means today is that the business is more consolidated than it's ever been. 4 companies, for example, make about 84% of all the beef in the United States. 4 companies make about half the chicken. By contrast, 40 years ago, 36 companies made that same amount.
There were 36 companies to 4.
That's
roughly.
right. That's right.
So how are we able to get inside the business? I mean, it's a pretty well-guarded secret what often happens.
It is, and there's sort of an atmosphere of fear around this. People weren't willing to talk. It just took a lot of time. I started this on the ground level in these towns where the big meat companies operate. I knocked on a lot of doors. I had a lot of doors slammed in my face. But I started to get more interviews, and eventually I interviewed the senior people that built Tyson Foods, Don Tyson, the lieutenants around him. And I got a very accurate picture of how this company really operates, how this system was built, and how things really play out in rural America today.
Maybe if I can share with everyone something that you have taught me. This is how big business has taken over the entire chicken industry, from conception of the egg to the supermarket. So let's go through this. The first step, of course, is genetics. What Tyson's chickens do is they have been able to breed eggs that are special. They're state-of-the-art eggs. The DNA was tweaked to create little elite chickens that grow twice as fast on half as much feed. Step 2 are the hatcheries. Tyson actually owns all the hatcheries and dictates how these eggs are hatched and cared for. The eggs are dropped on conveyor belts, and they're heated until they hatch. Step 3, and again, it's all owned by Tyson. They pick up the chicks at the hatchery, and they deliver these baby chicks to another farm.
Factory.
Provides the feed and the vets
Factory
to
farms.
these farmers. And then he comes back
Large,
and retrieves these chickens
cruel.
6 weeks later, where they're taken to the slaughterhouse.
Meatvideo.com.
1 million chickens are processed in a Tyson slaughterhouse. And everything from chicken nuggets to boneless breasts.
1 billion.
All this chicken is trucked to your local supermarket where it's sold under many different brand names. So I actually never thought of the name Tyson that much, but
Most eat about 35 birds a year.
come from that company. At the center of the book, Chris describes this term called chickenized. Chickenized. It sounds like a way of preparing chicken, but it's not.
It's not, and it's a funny word. You hear it a lot in rural America. I mean, most technically, the word chickenized refers to that model you just described, vertically integrated, where one company controls and owns all the means of operation. All these little things that used to be independent businesses in Main Street, the hatchery, the feed mill, the slaughterhouse, they've all been brought into the silo of one corporation's control. But more broadly, when people say chickenized, they're referring to an industry where a company calls all the shots, where it tells farmers how to operate, and where it keeps the lion's share of the profit.
Meatvideo.com, factory farms.
Big doesn't mean bad. Just because one company dominates the industry doesn't mean that it's an unhealthy solution. For most of us like chicken because it is a healthy option.
You know, you're exactly right. I mean, big is not inherently bad. You get economies of scale, and getting big can help you make products a lot cheaper. In my opinion, Titanic is bad, and that's exactly what these companies have become by merging and growing so huge, and that has a lot of bad impacts for consumers. Well, first of all, the book shows that Tyson Foods has such a broad reach across the market, it can cut supplies and keep prices higher, and that's exactly what the big poultry companies are doing today. But secondly, when these firms get so big, they have tremendous influence in Washington. I've seen it myself. They're literally helping write the rules that regulate them, and that's not good for anybody. But finally, for anyone who's eating meat, feeding it to their kids, what this means is that just a handful of companies are determining how your meat's created. They're determining what chemicals are used in the slaughterhouse. They're determining what drugs are fed to the animals, and that has an impact on all of us.
Cancer.
So Chris actually was able to infiltrate the chicken industry firsthand to see how this poultry is made, processed, and prepared. So let's go through some of the concerns that you've raised.
Sure.
And this is, again, information that I was unaware of before this show. The first danger, you argue, is that the chickens, in order to get them cleaner, to remove some of the potential bacteria, are exposed to chemicals, peracetic acid and liquid chlorine. So why these chemicals and what do they do?
Okay. Virtually all the chicken you eat at the slaughterhouse is going to go through a bath of these chemicals. The reason why, again, is these chickens are going to spend 6 weeks of their life raised on a bed of litter. In other words, on a bed of their feces. And when they're shipped to the slaughterhouse, there are going to be a lot of fecal contaminants on that chicken. As they go down these assembly lines, they're going to be washed in peracetic acid, and that's meant to zap these contaminants like salmonella or E. coli. And then they'll go through another bath with chlorine to rinse that carcass off. I mean, a chicken might go through 3 chemical baths like this as it goes through the slaughterhouse.
All right, so let me show you how this works. We aren't in a factory, so I've taken the liberty to show you a simple version of a much more complicated process.
Meatvideo.com on how they're raised factory farm, large and cruel.
The bacteria. Then you're supposed to wash it
Food
out.
Inc. is a good movie, too.
I can
Food
imagine
Inc.
that this doesn't seem quite as exact as I would have hoped. And I only raise that because we would never, ever drink peracetic acid or liquid chlorine directly. We know that's not good. High levels can corrode our internal organs. They've been associated with tumors.
Go vegan.
But the reality is,
Meatvideo.com.
I don't know how much of this stuff
Go
is
vegetarian or
left over
vegan.
when the chicken comes through. I gather that seems to be, an unknown.
It's a huge question mark. I mean, these companies have shown in a lab setting that you spray this acid on the chicken and it'll dissolve when it's exposed to oxygen. But that's a lab setting. We really need more information about the real-world setting of a poultry plant, especially when these birds are going through multiple chemical baths. And again, it's this kind of technology is what you need when you're running these plants at top speed and pushing as much chicken through as possible.
From the excess
another
weight.
issue which I'm very alarmed by. You see
Billions
that
go
although
through
this is all done, when the chickens are coming through this plant so quickly,
35 per person a year.
Like bacteria. Share that information with everybody.
Absolutely. There was a really concerning report that came out just earlier this year that was done by Consumers Union and Pew Research. They went out and tested chicken at the grocery store level across the United States. What they found was that in over half of the chicken, there was contamination by fecal contaminants like E. coli bugs or things like that. Now, not all bugs like that are created equal. Some are more like a chihuahua, others more like a pit bull. But this study found that almost half had bugs and bacterium that are resistant to multiple drugs. That's worrisome, and that's concerning. And again, this is at the grocery store level where we're buying the meat.
That worries me, because when you have drug-resistant bacteria in half of the poultry or more, that means we're all potentially exposed to that. It can get in a small little nicks in your leg. You make a small little error, and all of a sudden you have an infection with something that's hard to treat. So let's walk back over here. I'm very concerned about what you're sharing with us. And I would have thought that there'd be some government oversight. I mean, who's supposed to be protecting us with regard to the
non-profit welfare groups do more than the USDA and FDA.
Well, a lot of our food is protected by the FDA,
undercover
but the meat
investigations.
industry is a little
Undercover
unique in that the
investigations.
USDA is monitoring these plants and these slaughterhouses. And my reporting has shown that the USDA just is absolutely captured by the big meat companies it regulates. I've seen this time and time again. And at this point, the meat industry is successfully lobbying to ramp up production at these poultry houses while scaling back the number of USDA food inspectors that are going to be there.
What makes you so suspicious of the meat industry? What makes you concerned that they're not going to act honorably?
Let me please give you one example.
Factory
and
farms,
this has
they
to
already
do with
treat
cattle,
animals like trash.
not chickens, but I think
They don't
it's
care
really
about you,
illustrative of what we're
their
talking
health,
about.
environment,
You know, I found out that around 2005,
or the animals.
these big feedlots that provide cattle to Tyson Foods started using this drug called Zilmax. Tyson was encouraging it. Other companies followed suit. Zilmax was shown to hurt the quality of steak. It made steaks that were less tender, they didn't taste as good, but when you fed this drug to cattle, they would just swell up with muscle in the final couple months of their life, and that helped boost profits at the slaughterhouse. When just 4 companies decided to start using this drug, that meant this drug became the industry standard, even though most consumers had never heard about it. Again, 4 companies make almost 90% of the beef in the United States.
Meatvideo.com.
I took the company's
Undercover
word that this was a
investigations.
safe drug. I was concerned that it was producing a lower quality product, and that's what I wrote about. Just about a year ago, some very concerning studies started to come to light that this drug was hurting the animals. It was paralyzing cattle. Some animals were losing hooves. And these firms just quite suddenly stopped using it. What concerns me was that this drug became so widespread so quickly without consumers even knowing about it. It was sort of like, put it out there, experiment first, and then we see what the after effects are.
Can you imagine if you did that in medicine? Like, came up with a drug and said, let's just treat everybody with it and see how it goes, and if it doesn't work, we'll just take it off the market. I mean, it would wreak havoc in the way we take care of folks. I'm fearful it's doing the same thing with our food supply. So give me some.
Chickens are the most abused animal on the planet, and most eat 35 a year.
When they're cooking their next meal of chicken.
Go vegan.
Here's what I think is really important. Ask questions when you go to the grocery store. Talk to your butcher. Try to find out as best you can where this meat is coming from.
Conditions.
You might see a variety of brand names, but most of them are going to trace back to 4 companies. Ask about the production methods, the drugs that are used, the chemicals that are used. Try to get more information. And secondly, you can buy your chicken last, for example.
99% come from factory farms. Meatvideo.com. Undercover investigations.
To keep your preparing areas very clean. I mean, the industry itself is saying you must do that because, as Consumers Union shown, there's so much contamination. You have to fully cook it and keep your kitchen clean.
Yeah, don't forget, don't wash the chicken. When you wash chicken, you spread the bacteria around the kitchen. Just take it out of the bag and toss it in the oven, and make sure you cook it to 165, which is the current recommendation. We reached out to Tyson Foods. They told us they never required their cattle suppliers to use Zilmax, but did require them to stop when they learned about their harmful side effects. They also sent us a written statement, and they said in part, USDA inspectors are stationed in our meat processing plants full-time every day. We also have our own food safety and quality assurance staff of more than 2,000 people.
Meatvideo.com for the truth of the largest factory farms. Undercover investigations.
Full video statement regarding Zilmax and their complete written statement along with their
employees who got jobs to monitor them and whistleblow.
And they chose not